So I read today from Matthew chapter 19, verses 13 through 15. Then little children were being brought to Jesus in order that he might lay his hands on them and pray. The disciples spoke sternly to those who brought them. But Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me, and do not stop them, for it is to such as these that the kingdom of heaven belongs." And he laid his hands on them and went on his way. Some things change, and some things never do. Children and youth and young adults are still looked at with some suspicion. Let's face it, kids are noisy. They can be rambunctious. They can be disrespectful. They don't know all the proper rules or the proper ways of behaving. Or even when we tell them, they intentionally break them. When it's time to be serious, children might not know it. They can get loud during the prayer, during communion. They might be rolling on the floor during the most important times when they should be paying attention. I remember when I was a kid, I used to bring a book every Sunday to church. I'd read during the sermon, and the preacher would joke me about it, asking me what the Hardy Boys were up to today. Or they might decide to disobey just because. Kids take lots of love and attention. They absorb all we have to give, and they don't have too much to give back. They don't have any money to give us. And then while they might come to church for a little while, life situations can change or sports can get in the way, and they might stop coming and not come anymore. There's often this feeling in the church that children and youth just take from us without giving anything back. The youth come here for lock-ins overnight. They come for youth group every other Friday. But then when it comes time to work, where are they? We plan these work days at 8 a.m. on a Saturday, and none of the youth show up for them, or they come late. Or they play basketball in the sanctuary, even at times when it's not really appropriate. So it seems to be this thing, the youth, the young adults, the children, they take all the energy. They take all these resources, and they don't really give anything back. They have new crazy ideas, and they don't always respect the way things have been in the past. It's the young people who seem to be the majority out there occupying Wall Street or protesting economic inequality in whatever city. And in this story today, these children are being brought to Jesus. The young ones were taking up his time, his energy. Maybe we can understand the disciples when they're pushing the people away. I mean, these kids are just taking up his time, annoying them. They had nothing to contribute to the church. They weren't going to give any money. They might never come back, might never tell anyone about Jesus, might not really help the movement. All they were was a waste of time and money. And in those days, blessing and healing were like money, a limited thing that Jesus had. Remember the woman who had the bleeding, who touches Jesus for healing. And there's this fear in the story that she would drain away some of his energy. Maybe it's like that for the kids too. All they do is seem to drain away our time, our energy. They take so much. When we have children's worship and wonder, it takes some adults to go out with the kids. It takes adults out of the service. They don't get to participate in the prayer or listen to the sermon that Sunday. And sometimes when the same person ends up doing it every week, they get burnt out on being with the kids rather than getting to sit and worship and recharge. The kids take energy. Who can blame the disciples for turning them away? The young people take energy and don't have a lot to contribute. Or maybe we even envy them for the strength and youth and ability to lift tables that they do have. But when they don't show up when we want them to help out, who can blame the disciples for turning them away? And then Jesus, crazy Jesus, he tells them to let them in. He tells us that they are the ones to whom the kingdom of heaven belongs. What? We're the ones who have contributed the money. We're the ones who have contributed time. We've given our energy, our lives to the church. We're the ones who've built things up, and yet the kids are the ones who have the kingdom. Okay, so we can understand that, but also the way they understood children in the days of Jesus were not quite like we do today. In Jesus' day, children weren't quite the well-off, spoiled soccer players that some children are today. They didn't have computers and cell phones and all the toys and food that they wanted. What children were in Jesus' day was vulnerable. They were the ones who needed care. They're pretty helpless on their own. And in many ways that hasn't changed, but in some ways it's different. Who is vulnerable today? Who's vulnerable in our community? How are we vulnerable? When we start to think about building up our church, we start to think about getting people who can give money to the church, or people who can help lead, or people who can help carry tables and chairs, people who can help volunteer. Maybe we even think about reaching out to kids just because we want the parents to come worship and help and give. But Jesus welcomes the very people who are vulnerable. Jesus reaches out to the very people, the children, who have nothing to give back except for their smiles and their play. Now, anyone who's worked with children or youth or young adults knows that each of these has plenty of things to give to us. They can show us how to have fun and passion and play, even when we've forgotten how to do those things. But Jesus' point is that the vulnerable are the ones with the kingdom of heaven. When we are vulnerable, we know the kingdom of heaven. When we surrender, when we have nothing left to give, that's when we know that we need Jesus' hands laid upon our head. When we've reached our last penny, when we have no job or safety net, or when our bodies fail us and we wind up in the hospital, that's when we know we need Jesus. The ones vulnerable, such as children, own the kingdom of heaven. So it may not be only the children or youth who own the kingdom of heaven. The ones growing old, ones needing more help, ones who can no longer lift the chairs, these are the ones who also own the kingdom of heaven. The ones who worry about a basketball that might bump a leg and cause a fatal fall, who feel very vulnerable. These are the ones who own the kingdom of heaven. We get caught up. We start blaming each other. We start blaming the older people for being so demanding, or we blame the youth for lack of caring or attention, or we blame the children for lack of seriousness at the church. But we miss an opportunity. We miss the thing that Jesus is trying to teach us. When we become vulnerable, we know about the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven is not an easy thing. It's not a secure thing. It's something that calls us to be vulnerable. It means we have to depend upon Jesus. It means we have to embrace the cross. It means we can't do it on our own. Do you know, I think that sometimes we get this at Little Eagle Creek Christian Church. I remember the first Sunday I came here, how the children did a musical parade around the church. I remember the times where we do it all together, old and young, how we try to take care of each other, even when our ages are different, even when we're scared of different things, even when we hate each other, even when we envy the youth of the children or we envy the power and respect of the elders. I remember singing Peace Like a River together on Sunday morning with all the motions, old and young together, or singing some of the old hymns together, all together, young and old. Some of the favorite memories of the youth are the parties we've had, Things like hobo night, where young and old came together to play together. Jesus shows us how different, a different sort of community that we can be. The community that we here have been learning how to be. We become, through Christ, a community that welcomes the vulnerable. We welcome vulnerable people of whatever sort that can't give us anything. We welcome the vulnerable parts of ourselves that need Jesus. May we welcome the children and thus find the kingdom of heaven. May we welcome the older folks and thus find the kingdom of heaven. May we welcome the vulnerable parts of ourselves and feel the hands of Jesus laid upon our heads, blessing the hairs on our heads.